Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's great to see so much interest in this topic from all across the world. Thank you so much for giving your time and attending our webinar today. My name is Michael Josephs, and I'm the marketing manager here at Setra. I'm joined by my colleague, Michelle Mendoza, who is Setra's product manager for our room purification, indoor air quality, and room environmental monitor line of products. She has quite a bit. Today's webinar is titled Safer Spaces Through Isolation and Air Quality. Michelle will discuss the importance of investing in a long-term indoor air quality solution and ways to achieve cleaner, healthier, and ultimately, and importantly, safer air in any space. The webinar today will be recorded and we'll make it available shortly after we conclude. We'll open the floor up to Q&A through the chat functionality at the end of the presentation. If you have a burning question during the presentation, feel free to put it in there, and we might get to it. If not, we'll definitely get to it during the Q&A portion. So with that, I will hand it over to Michelle. And Michelle, why don't you kick us off?
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining us here today. We have a lot to go over, so I'm just going to jump right in. Okay, so as you likely saw when you signed up for the webinar, today we want to talk about the importance of isolation spaces, ventilation, and general air quality for any building. Obviously, COVID-19 has brought many of these items to the top of our minds, but we want to talk about the importance of these items for the long term as we hopefully, start to see the decline in cases and return to slightly more normal activities. We want to talk about the importance of these items for the long term. And then I want to touch on the Setra AirWatch, which is one of our newest products and one of our most cutting edge solutions in this area. I'll give a brief introduction to the Setra AirWatch just so you can understand kind of what it's doing in these areas. And then I'll switch over to talk about the latest guidelines that have come out from various organizations around ventilation and air quality as it relates to schools, nursing homes, offices, and general healthcare and hospital spaces. We'll talk about what's been highlighted there, and then how the Setra AirWatch can help you with those items with creating safer isolation spaces, using negative pressure, and then with creating a safer spaces with air circulation and air quality in any building. Okay, so in general, creating safer spaces, is important to think about investing for the long term. You also want to think about flexible solutions around this so that you're not locked into anything and you can react as the world changes around you. So what that means for a few different areas. For hospitals, they want to think about having more capacity and about having flexible capacity. For nursing homes and long-term care facilities, they need to have plans to respond to outbreaks in the future. We saw how impacted they were at the beginning and throughout COVID, and so planning for the long term is essential here to be prepared for whatever the future holds. In terms of schools, the importance of improved ventilation has been a really key topic as schools are thinking about and planning and beginning to bring students back. And these sustainable air quality improvements will help everyone that works and attends schools for the long term. For all other types of spaces, anything that's patient or client facing, like a doctor's office, a dentist, a hair salon, a nail salon, thinking about how purification in that space and the number of air changes in that space as patients come in and out is important as well for a long-term solution. Like we said at the beginning, a lot of this became top of mind because of COVID-19, but there's many more airborne infections than just COVID-19. I've listed a few of them below, but as you think about anything that is transmitted in airborne particles from human to human, especially in close contact areas, that's something that these solutions can help you mitigate the spread against. And then, like we said, I'll be touching upon this shortly, but there are guidelines that have come out across various industries encouraging improved air quality and ventilation practices. So we want to share how creating negative pressure spaces to contain outbreaks and then purifying the air to continually reduce exposure are two highly effective strategies for combating the spread of airborne diseases, and that's what we'll go into in detail today. The Setra AirWatch. So I'll give you this quick introduction to the AirWatch, and then we'll get into more of the application details in the later portion of the presentation. The AirWatch, like I said, is one of our newest products. It's quiet, it's compact, it can be easily brought into different spaces. You can see it's on wheels and can be installed to create isolation spaces with negative pressure. The negative pressure in the isolation spaces is what prevents contaminated air from escaping, and that helps you protect all the surrounding areas from any of those contaminated aerosols. The AirWatch can also be used as a purifier and to increase air circulation in any space. So we'll talk about those two different use cases and how easy it is to switch between them today. Like we said, it's that on-demand negative pressure that you get with this portable unit. It's the purification with the combination of UVC light and HEPA filtration that's inside of every single AirWatch unit. So on the inside of this unit, there's a filter box that holds the HEPA filter and the UV light. And so as the air runs through the unit, all of the air passes through the HEPA filter, the contaminants and particles are captured on that filter, and then the UVC light is entrained on that HEPA filter to neutralize and sterilize the air. That has led to the ability of the AirWatch to purify the air to greater than 99.99% effectiveness, as verified by a nationally recognized third-party lab with their test results. And so you can be confident that whether you're exhausting the air out to create negative pressure or recirculating the air to increase the air quality in that specific space, you're protected with the purification method that's inside the AirWatch. We'll also talk a lot about air changes per hour and increased air ventilation today. The flow rate of the AirWatch itself is 350 cubic feet per minute, which can significantly increase and improve the air changes per hour in many different spaces. And again, the key here is that you can customize these solutions for your isolation setup or your increased air circulation setup based on the needs that you have for your specific end use. Now I'm going to touch on the various guidelines and highlight some of these key areas so that you can see how these improved isolation spaces and improved air ventilation and air quality strategies can really be helpful long-term solutions across different applications. So what I'm sharing here are some excerpts from the latest update, February 2021, that ASHE made to their document on healthcare facilities, ventilation controls, and guidelines around suspected and confirmed patients with COVID-19. So specific for healthcare facilities, ASHE has come out with guidelines that have encouraged developing plans for creating temporary AIIRs, or airborne infection isolation rooms. The importance of being able to react quickly and have these plans in place is essential so that hospitals can react and expand their capacity as needed with these temporary or convertible airborne infection isolation rooms. ASHE also recommends creating individual care rooms or spaces that are still negatively pressurized, because the importance of negative pressure is one of the key features to combating against airborne infections. One of the notes as well that I wanted to highlight is that as you think about a negative pressure room or AIIR, the exhaust needs to be directed to the outdoors. And that is because the assumption here is that that exhaust isn't being purified. However, when you can purify an exhaust that can remove, at least 99.97% of the droplets using HEPA filtration, then you can either return it to general circulation or, exhaust it to other areas. The example that I'm showing here in the image is actually one of the examples that ASHE gives in their guidelines. They go through various acceptable configurations for temporary negative air room setups, and this one is one of the most straightforward. So you can see in the image that this example, they have a HEPA unit, which could be something like the AirWatch, brought into a single patient room which has a dedicated bathroom, so you can truly isolate that patient. You want to seal off the return air grill in the patient room, as they show in the image, so that none of this contaminated air can get back into the rest of the HVAC system. And then you want to place that HEPA unit, like the AirWatch, into the space and set up the exhaust so that it's exhausting outside of the space, so that it can create that negative pressure. You can also see in the image, the airflow is flowing into the space. That's the result of the negative pressure being created. That differential pressure is what keeps the contaminants inside and keeps the air flowing in that direction. You want to keep the door closed, and you want to be able to verify that the negative pressure has been created and monitor the negative pressure while the room is in service. That's where many of Setra's solutions around room pressure monitoring can help. And if you were to be looking at the AirWatch for a solution, the standard negative pressure AirWatch unit comes with a Setra Lite room pressure monitor, because the important thing here is that you've created the negative pressure and you can confirm that that negative pressure is being maintained with your pressure monitor. I think a couple of the, the other important points here on how they describe creation of these rooms, limiting patient transport is important. This is written for hospitals and healthcare facilities, but as you think about places like long-term care facilities, limiting the transport of that person who's potentially infected is going to protect all of the people in that space, both staff, other residents, other patients. Being able to truly isolate, using the negative pressure to protect the airflow and limit any transportation needed is essential here. There's a lot of good information in this ASHE document, and so I have the actual name of the document listed here below if you were looking for more information. But we just wanted to pull out and highlight the information on the temporary negative air room, so that you can see how this solution can help hospitals react and respond quickly as needed to expand their capacity. The last item listed here is that terminal cleaning should occur after sufficient time has elapsed for enough air changes to remove potentially infectious particles. And that part is important, and it's something that I want to expand upon a little further and share more from the guidelines that ASHE provides. So what that means is, after a person has been in the negative pressure room, and that person is obviously, has been either confirmed to be COVID positive, suspected to be COVID positive, any airborne infection risk from that person, they will be placed in this room. After they are discharged from that room, the room must be ventilated to be able to ensure that you have removed any leftover aerosols that are in that space. And so ASHE references a table that the CDC has actually put together. And so the CDC has published this information and their calculations and everything around this airborne contaminant removal. So after you discharge an infected patient, you need to know what air change per hour rate you're running at, and then you can use this table to determine how many minutes you should run that air change per hour before you can say that you have removed 99 or 99.9% of the contaminants that are in that space. And so it's a really helpful resource when thinking about, discharging an infected patient and what you need to do before bringing a new person or a new patient into that space. We'll talk a lot more about air changes per hour a little bit further on in the presentation as well, to help understand how you would calculate that and how you would think about that in your space. Next, I want to bring up a very recent release from ASHRAE, which is the Association for Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And so I think 1 or 2 days ago, they actually came out with an update for the ASHRAE handbook chapters on UVC to include updated best practices and guidance. And the reason that we want to share this with you today is to help explain a bit more about the stance on UVC and how effective it is against viruses and bacteria like COVID-19. UVC is what's used inside the AirWatch with a combination of HEPA filtration. and these recent updates that will be released by ASHRAE encourage the use of UVC against SARS-CoV-2, or the COVID-19 virus as it's more commonly known. The members of the technical committee, which is making this update, that's that TC 2.9, hope that this pandemic has left no doubt that the 254 nanometer germicidal wavelength can inactivate the genetic material in the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And so that's encouraging to, to continue to get that. That's a scientific support of the use of UV as a effective way to inactivate or neutralize the virus. And they go on to mention that it's even more susceptible to UVC damage than other coronaviruses that we've seen, like the one that led to the SARS outbreak. And so it is encouraging to see that it is, in addition to the test results that we have for the AirWatch, there's, a lot of information out there and studies and, stances coming out from these organizations that it is an effective way to fight the COVID-19 virus. The last point I want to bring up is that it's important to think about the volume and the velocity of the air that is traveling and in how that impacts the length of exposure to the germicidal wavelength, the UV light there. And so that's residence time or dwell time, as you may have seen it in various other materials. The way that the AirWatch incorporates that is by combining the HEPA filter with the UVC light bulbs. The HEPA filter traps the particles and allows for that residence time or dwell time to occur with the UVC light and trained on the HEPA filter, and so you can be sure that it is, effectively neutralizing the virus. The next item that I want to share is from the Department of Education, and so very recently, the Department of Education has come out with handbooks around strategies for safely reopening elementary and secondary schools. There is a lot of information in here, and of course, all of the general guidelines around mask wearing and social distancing are covered in these guidelines, but they do also highlight ventilation improvements as an important factor to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 in schools. They recommend that you develop a ventilation improvement plan for the school based on tools from the CDC. And so I've highlighted a few key points that the CDC has around tools on ventilation improvement. You want to think about total airflow supply to the occupied spaces, the room air changes or air changes per hour, like we've spoken about previously as well as whatever air filtration is occurring in that space, both with HEPA filtration and then treatment with UV germicidal light or UVC bulbs. I think a couple other points here that are interesting as in these recommendations is that they suggest running the HVAC system or running whatever system you have to increase the air changes per hour at a maximum effort for 2 hours before and after the school is occupied. And so if you think about portable units like the AirWatch, those can be brought into spaces that will be occupied to improve the air quality both before and then after the spaces are occupied. And so it's really helpful to think about the airflow in the space while the space is occupied, but also before and after, so you can ensure that the people inside of that space, the occupants, are exposed to the most the most effective aspects of your ventilation improvements. And lastly, I just want to highlight that in addition to ventilation improvements, these Department of Education guidelines also bring up the importance of isolation to limit secondary transmission in schools. And so if you are developing a plan for a school, as you are thinking about bringing people back, having a dedicated isolation space in case a child shows symptoms at school is key. And negative pressure adding to that isolation is just going to make that all the more effective to protect everyone else in the school. There are a few guidelines that are out there for long-term care facilities and nursing homes. Nothing to the extent of these, super recently released guidelines for some of these other areas, but I did want to cover these briefly There's a Facility Guidelines Institute that publishes design guides for long-term care homes, and that highlights items like individual air exchange for patient rooms so that you're not cross-contaminating, and the ability to contain and isolate a resident with an illness comfortably in their room. That's where portable units like the AirWatch really come into play to help here. There are some loose guidelines that the CDC has recommended on isolation in long-term care facilities as well. But really the gold standard in terms of isolation of someone who's sick is the airborne infection isolation room that we covered in the ASHE guidelines a little bit earlier. So continuing with the content around isolation spaces, there are a lot of different ways that they protect the communities, regardless of where you're located, whether you're in a hospital, whether you're in a long-term care facility, a school, anywhere else. So anyone who's symptomatic or who's a patient or a confirmed positive case, you are able to protect everyone else around them, which are sometimes the most vulnerable populations, from contaminated air escaping. If you're able to use something like a portable unit or expand your capacity of isolation spaces so that you don't have to disrupt the person that needs to be isolated too much from where they currently are, then that's a great benefit as well. Being able to implement fast isolation is going to help you minimize even further the exposure to others. You also want to think about the staff that are working in all of these different spaces. They're exposed to patients, residents, students, anyone who is symptomatic. And so being able to deploy negative pressure isolation solutions is going to show that you care for the staff that's working here, and the ability to expand your capacity quickly and again react quickly is just going to increase that safety overall. If you can incorporate air purification and increased airflow, then you are benefiting everyone else in the space that you have that increased airflow and air purification with the air quality that they're exposed to. And then lastly, as you think about visitors, other patients, other clients, anyone else who's around and in these spaces and communities, the overall environment becomes safer for anyone that's in the building because you've implemented the most effective isolation practices of negative pressure isolation. And so by doing that, you've protected the space, you've protected everyone else that's in that space from additional exposure. And being able to show that you're doing everything that you can using hospital level or close to hospital level isolation practices, then you can show that you're really protecting the community that's going to be interacting in your building. So like we talked about when I gave the quick introduction to the AirWatch can be used to create these negative pressure isolation spaces. You can create that on-demand negative pressure, and that's what's going to prevent air from escaping, protecting everyone in the surrounding area. The schematic here all shows similar to the room from the ASHE guidelines as well. If you bring that portable unit in, the airflow is going to be directed into the space, keeping all of the contaminants inside. Some key features of the AirWatch, of course, are that you are able to monitor the room pressure with the included central light monitor that you can mount on the wall outside the space. And you have various different options for where you send your exhaust. You can send it outside, you can send it up into a ceiling tile, you can even incorporate it into your HVAC return because it is purified inside of the AirWatch. When you think about air changes per hour as well, there is a lot of air changes per hour that are being generated. I'll touch on that in the next slide on how you can think about the details there. And then if you're able to use a portable unit that is not too big, not too loud, that's just going to make it all the less disruptive to your space. Okay, so air changes per hour. This is a very commonly used term and an important term to understand. When a room is negatively pressurized, the air is exhausted out, and so the entire volume of air inside that room is being changed over and replaced with new supply air. If you have a portable unit like the AirWatch, then the supply air is coming from the traditional air supply, and then the exhaust is sent out through the portable unit, like the diagram that we saw earlier on the ASHE guidelines. And so increasing the air changes per hour is going to increase the number of times that the volume in the air is changed over. To calculate the exact air changes per hour that you have, it depends on the size of your space. And so you need the full dimensions, length, width, and height, nothing fancy. about the, about the how you measure those dimensions. It can just be the length, width, and height of the room. And that will allow you to calculate the air changes per hour that you're going to get with the air flow rate that you have. And so if you're using the AirWatch, we actually have a button that you can use and a sheet that you can use to enter the volume of air in your room. And then that tells you how many air changes per hour you're getting. For example, if you say something has 10 air changes per hour, that means that the entire volume of air is changing over every 6 minutes. Okay, so when negative pressure isolation creation is not necessarily possible for whatever reason, it can be limitations on the existing space that you have that may make it, unreasonable for you to incorporate negative pressure. There are still things that you can do with air flow, air changes per hour, like we spoke about, and air purification that can increase the safety of the space. And so if you think about a portable unit like the ones in yellow shown here that are purifying the air and spitting out air that is recirculated, that has been purified, you're going to improve the air quality inside of that space and sterilize the air that that's in there. We talked about this example earlier, but it's one of the most common applications that we've seen for the AirWatch, and it's an important one to think through for various different spaces. If you have an infected person in a space and you want to turn that space over and bring in a new person, being able to effectively turn over the air depends on the number of air changes per hour that you're getting in that space. And so if you can increase the air changes per hour by bringing in a portable unit, that's increasing the air changes per hour going through the unit and increasing the air changes per hour in the space overall, then that will speed up the time and the effectiveness of the cleaning in your space. And so that can really help in increasing patient throughput and reducing wait times. The table that we showed earlier is from the CDC. That can be found either in the ASHE guidelines or online, but at an air change per hour rate of 10 ACHs, 1 air change every 6 minutes, then the CDC says that you need 28 minutes for 99% of the contaminants to be removed after someone infected has been in that room. And the table, of course, covers all different air change per hour rates, and so you can use that as a helpful resource. I just want to wrap up by talking about the purification method inside of the AirWatch. The AirWatch sterilization process, which is the combination of UVC and HEPA filtration, the UV bulbs entrained on the HEPA filter inside of the AirWatch unit, is better than 99.9% effective against viruses and bacteria at neutralizing the viruses and bacteria that come through the unit. This was verified with a nationally recognized testing lab, and you can see the results there with the viruses and bacteria that were used to prove that this unit is effective against those. And then in addition to that, if you think about general air quality, the number of particles in the air is an important thing to think about with general air quality. And so the AirWatch unit was actually tested with our advanced particle counters that we have that are typically used in clean room, and shown that to be effective at reducing the volume of particles, the concentration of particles that are in the air. And so that's what's shown here in the graph, is that a room running with no air purification, it has a certain level of particles that are just floating around in the air from natural use of that space. And if you bring in air purification, that concentration of particles can be reduced significantly. And again, you're increasing the air circulation and the air changes per hour, even though you're just using it as a purifier. I want to briefly touch on as well a way that you can think through a holistic solution for the air quality in your space. So of course you can run an air purifier 24/7, or you can run it 2 hours before and 2 hours after someone comes into the space. But if you're able to use a monitor to monitor the general air quality, which is something that the Department of Education also came out with in their guidelines, that you can, if you can provide acceptable indoor air quality for the current occupancy level in the space, then you can really get strong control over the use of your purification methods and the ability to show the air quality level that's in your space. And so Setra actually has a brand new product that they're coming out with that monitors the air quality in the space across several different parameters like concentration of particles, CO2, VOC, and based off the light ring on this air quality monitor, which is tied to the EPA's air quality scale here, you can see that green is good, and if it starts to turn yellow, orange, red, then you would want to be able to turn on your AirWatch purification solution and improve the quality of the air. And then you have the monitor showing green again, that you have provided that once you have provided that improvement to the air quality. So it's a nice way to be able to prove that the air quality is running well and to effectively and efficiently use the purification solution of the AirWatch. So I just want to wrap up by showing a few different use cases and spaces where the AirWatch is used, and just summarize by saying that because the exhaust from the AirWatch is sterilized inside the unit with UV and HEPA filtration, greater than 99.99% against virus and bacteria. That means that you can use this unit as either a negative pressure creation solution for isolation or as a comprehensive air purification solution for increased air purification or air quality in the space and air ventilation in the space, and that can be used interchangeably just by removing the hose and exhaust system of the unit. And so there's a lot of dynamic things that you can do with the AirWatch to improve the safety of your spaces. So I know we covered a lot. I wanted to make sure that we had some time for questions as well. And thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. This was incredibly helpful. Thanks everybody for staying, a couple minutes late here. We are going to have time for Q&A. If you have to drop, no worries. Again, we are recording the session, so you can check back on the Q&A later, but please feel free to get your question. We've already had a number. One question came in around ordering numbers. I'm assuming that's part numbers for AirWatch. In the general chat, I am putting in the link to the AirWatch page. It's also on Michelle's slide right here. You can get part numbers on the data sheets. We also have online ordering, so you can place an order today if you like, and it has all the part numbers on there. Michelle, does AirWatch need to recirculate the air to achieve a low viral count in the room, or is it effective on the first pass?
Thanks, good question. So the combination of the HEPA filter and the UV light inside of the unit means that the particles are trapped immediately on that first pass, and then they are entrained on the filter and sterilized with the UV bulbs immediately on that first pass. So you don't need to do any extra recirculation to achieve that level of purification. It is first pass purified inside of the unit because of the way that it is set up. And that ties back to something that I mentioned earlier with what ASHRAE put out around UVC or UV light usage and the dwell time. And so because we use the combination of HEPA and UV light, we get that dwell time that it makes it effective at first pass.
Excellent. And I've seen a few questions come in around the HEPA filter.
Okay.
So combine a couple. One is, how long does the HEPA filter last? And I guess this is related. Is there a way to monitor the status of the HEPA filter inside the AirWatch? And then again, generally, how often should it be replaced?
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to pull up the photo. So you can see the green ring on the center of the AirWatch. You can see it in several of these photos. And what that green ring is doing is that's actually monitoring the status of the entire purification system that is inside of the unit. And so the HEPA filter has a pressure drop across it that's being monitored by that actual ring, the device that's behind that. And the pressure, once the pressure drop gets too high, that ring will glow yellow, indicating that you need to replace the HEPA filter. The estimated life of the HEPA filter is about 1 year. if you're in a space where, like we have AirWatch is being used in hair salons, if you're in a space where there's, you know, extra stuff in the air, maybe some additional particles like from hair products, then you can have confidence that if there is increased pressure drop across the HEPA filter, that light ring will tell you as soon as the HEPA filter has become too clogged and needs to be replaced. Again, in normal operation, it's going to be about 1 year, and all of those replacement parts for the HEPA filter and the UV bulbs can be ordered through Setra. The last thing I'll say here is just that on the light ring there, if it glows red, that actually indicates that you need to replace the UV bulbs. And so those are based off of the runtime. They have 8,000 hours of runtime on the UV bulbs, which if you run it for 24/7 is about a year, but in many cases, these are being run, you know, not 24/7, and so it'll be longer than that. If once you get close to that, or once you get to 7,500 hours of runtime, the light ring will glow red, indicating that it's time to replace the UV bulbs. Again, they can be ordered through us. If you haven't been running it for long and it does glow red, that indicates that there's a potential malfunction or something going on with the UV bulbs on the inside. So that's another great way to ensure that the purification methods inside with the UV and the HEPA are working as expected. And if not, it allows you to get, you know, it alerts you to investigate what's going on with the purification methods inside.
What a great feature that is. I mean, I know a lot of the other air purifiers out there have some sort of countdown day timer for the HEPA filter, but that can be unreliable. I mean, people that are putting this in critical spaces want to make sure that the purification is actually working. And it's just amazing that, you know, we've been able to work that technology and just a really easy way to see it into the unit. Question that came in. By the way, Michelle, there's a lot of questions. I know we're a few minutes past. Do you mind spending a little extra time to get through these?
Oh, of course, yeah. And you know, if there's any questions that we don't get a chance to cover, please feel free to reach out to us through our contact forms or anything. But I'd be happy to stay on and answer questions coming in.
Excellent. So we will continue to field these. What are the pros and cons of using an ionization product as opposed to Setra AirWatch?
Sure. So with the mention of ionization product, I'm assuming you're talking about some of the other air purification methods that are out there on the market, and ionization being one of them in particular. So I've talked a lot about what we use, which is HEPA filtration plus UV bulbs and the benefits of that. I think the simplest way to say it is that what we're doing is pulling the air in, capturing anything bad that's in there on the HEPA filter, and then neutralizing that with the UV bulbs. And so that is leading to essentially no exposure to anything that's bad in the air, because it's getting pulled in and captured by the AirWatch unit. Some other methods that are out there for air purification, like ionization, are actually charging the particles that are in the air, but not capturing them, not doing anything with them. When you add that charge to the particle in the air, it's just going to drop the particle to the ground or to the surface or to whatever or whoever is in that space. And so I think that the benefit that we have here is the purification method we're using, combined with the airflow that we are providing, is pulling in, capturing anything bad, and neutralizing it. And then in addition, it's providing you those increased ventilation benefits.
Thank you. Here's another question, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing this right, but it says in the test results, is virus PHIX174 the surrogate for COVID?
Yes, exactly. So we're actually going to be posting a really extensive FAQ on our website very soon that will contain a lot of detailed information about some of these questions, and this one in particular. So you can see the the test results here on the screen that we've screenshotted from our results that we got back from the laboratory that we worked with. And as you know, of course, COVID is still such a new virus in the air, and there's a lot of precautions that are taken around it. And so unless you're a biosafety level rated lab of one of the highest levels, like a 3 or a 4, you're not experimenting with COVID on on COVID particles on a lot of things. And so to be able to use a proxy like the virus that's shown here, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it either, MJ. So Phe-X174, that is being used as a proxy to estimate the effectiveness against an exact COVID particle. The lab, however, has indicated that this particle is even more difficult to capture and neutralize than a COVID particle. And so that's why that's used to give us that confidence in the abilities of the purification method on the inside.
Thank you. And here's actually a question that we get frequently. What if the unit has a PTAC unit what if the room has a PTAC unit for heat and air already installed in the room? A PTAC unit, for anybody that's not familiar, is a package terminal air conditioner. You can think of it as a ductless system. And then there's a follow-up question from the same person that asked that. Does this affect pressure in a negative way?
Sure. So I'll try and explain this from kind of a big picture level view. So when you bring the AirWatch into the space to create negative pressure, that is an added flow rate that you have in the space that you're examining. And so if you have a unit that's already in there installed, generating specific flow rates, you need to think about that what flow rates that is providing when you're doing things like your air change per hour calculations. If you are trying to create a isolation space, I'm going to go back to the photo from ASHI, you need to think about any return duct or return unit, anything that is spitting air into the return, if you truly want to isolate the air that's in this space. And so in this example of the temporary airborne infection isolation room, they recommend sealing off that return air and sending all the exhaust out the portable unit. The reason for that is that you do not want there to be any chance that the contaminated air is going out through the other pathways of airflow in the space. When you think about the pressure that you're creating, if you have supply air coming in with that additional unit, then you want to use that you want to take that into consideration as well when you're trying to create the negative pressure. If the supply air is stronger than the portable unit that you've brought in, so we run at 350 CFM, if you have supply air coming in that's greater than that, then you're actually going to be you're going to have difficulty creating that negative pressure. You'll probably even create a positive pressure because you're not pulling the air out at a fast enough rate. And so there's a lot around balancing of the airflows in your space, especially if you're looking to incorporate multiple different isolation rooms. You'll want to think through the full airflows across your space. And of course, if you have additional units in your space that are adding to the airflow or pulling away from the airflow, you'll definitely want to consider whether those should be adjusted to accommodate for the negative pressure that you're creating. One other question that we commonly get around this area is if you have like an air conditioning or a heating unit that kicks on and off based off of the temperature, that actually makes it really difficult to balance the flows in the room. And so what's typically recommended when you're trying to create negative pressure is that you run those units with the fan always on. So not with heat or air conditioning always on, but with the fan always on so that you have a constant flow, and then it can react with the heating or air conditioning method as it needs to. But that constant flow allows you to be balanced with the portable AirWatch unit in the space and create that negative pressure.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Setra, for those on the webinar that aren't familiar with us, we have decades of experience in the HVAC space area. So I know our application engineers and our experts and our sales team, they're always happy to have one-on-one conversations to make sure you're getting the right solution for your space. So as Michelle said earlier, please reach out through our website, and I'll be keeping an eye on inquiries coming through for the rest of the day today, and we'll make sure that any inquiries get passed to our application engineers and our experts as soon as possible. Michelle, I know there's been a lot of demand for this product, obviously all through COVID and even up until now, but what is the current lead time? We had a question come in around that.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually wanted to make sure I had a chance to cover that before we finished up, because the team has worked really hard. I can't say enough good things about our operations and our supply chain and our engineering team that has worked super hard on getting this product out the door as fast as we can. And we can currently offer, for quantities that are less than 15 units, we can offer lead times of less than 1 week. So if you need, 1 to 2 units, we can get you a unit in 1 to 2 days. We can get that shipped out of here. And so we've been able to, the team has worked really hard to be able to speed up our lead time. So if you're in need of the units, I would say a 1 week lead time is going to be what we can offer you for anything up to 15 units. And then for more than that, we can give you an answer on a case by case basis, but it should be similar to just if you want 30 units, it'll be around 2 weeks. It'll be 1 to 2 weeks, depending on what's in the current backlog. But really excited to be able to share that 1 week or less lead times are available for this product now.
Excellent. And questions keep rolling in, so please, if you need to drop off, again, this is being recorded, but we'll field a few more before we wrap up. Michelle, here's an interesting one. Our building is near residential areas. Is it safe to exhaust this air outside?
Yeah, definitely. So the purification that's happening inside of the unit happens no matter what type of unit you're using, what type of application you're using it for. And so whether you're exhausting the air out or recirculating the air, you are still getting that 99.99% effective level of purification. And so if you're exhausting it out into the air, it is completely safe to do so because that air has been purified. And once you get out into the outdoor air, it's even further diluted by the general outdoor airspace, but it's going to be even cleaner than outdoor air at that point because it's been purified with the AirWatch. So no concerns there. Even at a ground floor level window, all of that is fully safe and acceptable to do.
Excellent. This one we might want to take offline. I'll ask it anyways. How can we compare air sterilizer units with plasma and UV technology with, I guess, Setra? What's the value add that Setra provides? Which one is more effective with COVID-19 virus? And what about consumable lifetime? So feel free to field it, or we could reply to that offline.
Yeah, I think actually our marketing team is working on some additional blog content around different purification methods that are out there. I talked a lot about what we're doing with the combination of UV and HEPA and the benefits there. And I'll say again that the ability to increase the airflow and capture the units capture the contaminants in the AirWatch are going to be the key added value that's coming from this unit. But I would say for more detailed comparisons to all the different types of purification methods that are out there, keep an eye out on our blog, and we're working actively on more information so that you can understand the pros and cons of different methods of purification. But really what we've highlighted today around the combination of UV and HEPA is that you're getting that extra airflow, you're getting the capturing of the particles and the neutralization of any virus and bacteria inside the AirWatch.
Excellent. I think we'll field a couple more and then we can wrap it up. Feel free to questions coming. Again, we can always take these offline if we don't have time. Do you make a 220 volt AC powered unit?
We are actively working on that one. So as of today, it is just a 120 volt powered unit, but we're actively working on the 220 volt, more internationally friendly powered unit. And right now, the time estimate that we have for that unit to be available, with the associated regulatory marks around it, is the end of March and early April. So coming up sooner than we, than anyone realizes, but should be about a month from now, it'll be available.
Excellent, that's great news. And this last question, it's two questions, I'll combine them. How do I confirm there is negative pressure? And when confirming negative pressure, if the differential is not enough, what are my options?
Yep. So with the negative pressure unit, if you order the standard unit, which is part number A, IIR 06AA, and you of course see that on our data sheet, that includes the Setralite room pressure monitor. If you haven't seen the Setralite room pressure monitor before, I would highly recommend checking it out on our website. It's been a really exciting product that we've had for a little over a year now, and it's a very simple, fast, effective way to check the pressure in your space. It fits into an installation that no bigger than a light bulb, and it gives you an indication of green and red, whether you're achieving the pressure that you have desired. And so we highly recommend using that for your continual monitoring. If you don't have the ability to set that up, or you view this as a more temporary unit that you're going to be moving quite frequently, we do actually offer portable units for spot checking. So you can carry that around with you and spot check the pressure that you've created, and get that instantaneous check. But if you want continuous monitoring, we recommend the permanent installation of the Setralite room pressure monitor. If you run into trouble achieving the negative pressure that you want to achieve, we have a very extensive troubleshooting table in our operating instructions that we provide with this. But just in general, the things that you want to check are, what are the other airflows coming into my space? Again, if your supply air is stronger than the exhaust air going through the AirWatch, like the diagram that we show here, you're going to have trouble creating that negative pressure because it's just going to overpower it. If you have an old building and there's gaps in the ceiling and the windows and the door, there can be air escaping there. And so you want to look at what we call the seal on your room if you're truly trying to achieve negative pressure. And then lastly, the length of the exhaust hose that's running from the AirWatch unit to the window is an important consideration as well. We provide, I think, 15 feet of exhaust hose. If you're gonna go beyond that and order your own exhaust hose and make it longer, then you're gonna start to reduce a little bit of that flow rate coming through the unit, just because it has such a long exhaust hose to overcome. So those are a few things to think about. But if you do have trouble, our operating instructions have an extensive troubleshooting manual and table around creation of negative pressure. And then of course, our technical support team, like you mentioned earlier, is available with a lot of expertise in this area.
Excellent. We had a few more questions we didn't get to, but we can definitely answer those offline. I want to thank everybody who stayed on 23 minutes past our end time. I really think there was some great discussions, great questions asked. So thank you very much for that. It's great to see so much interest around AirWatch, because we truly believe that this product can create healthier air, and that's what is more important than ever right now as the world continues to combat COVID-19. I put the link to Setralite, which Michelle just mentioned, in the chat. Again, the link for AirWatch is up there on the slide and also in the chat. And I want to thank everybody for joining. Thank you, Michelle, for your time. This entire presentation, including the Q&A, was recorded, and we will make that recording available shortly. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.